On today's show, Capitals assistant coach Mitch Love was fired by the Capitals.
You're Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Capitals were rolling. Things were going so well. Well, that train fell off the track last night versus Ottawa. What did we notice? A bit later, we'll talk about the Capitals and coaches' challenges. The Capitals have not fared too well this season as far as coaching challenges are concerned. But just to get it going here, the headline news on Sunday, as I'm recording this at 6:18 p.m. Eastern, is the Capitals have fired assistant coach Mitch Love. Now, this was a developing story today around lunchtime. I had heard from online, I heard from different sources that he was going to be suspended for the duration of the season. And then a bit later in the afternoon, the word came out that the Capitals fired him. And what do we know about that? So let's dive into that in the first segment of today's show, talking about Mitch Love, the situation, and accountability. And this is the heavy part. Off-ice news matters here. It's not often that I do a lead-in with the show talking about personal issues, I guess you could say. But this is something that has a bit of weight behind it. This was, shall I say, an assistant coach for the Washington Capitals. So I think it is something to dive into. But assistant coach Mitch Love has been suspended by the NHL for the 25-26 season, and the Capitals have officially relieved him of his duties. We don't know the specifics. All that is being said is that is in nature of a domestic issue. And then that person brought their issues forward to the league, and that is why he was suspended. And that's the tough part. He will not return to the staff for the Capitals. It is over for him. But at the end of the day, I don't know the particulars, but it was found valid by the National Hockey League that this person that was making the claim stood up. So honestly, it's the right move by the Capitals. It's not like it was just a comment that was just kind of lobbed in there. They did a thorough investigation, and he was going to be suspended for the rest of the year. And the Capitals are like, I think we've seen enough here. So they're ready to move on. But what does that mean for the Capitals? As you know, that Patrick Weller has served as the Capitals interim assistant coach in Love's absence. With a former Captain Brent Thompson filling in for Weller and Hershey. The Caps have not announced whether Weller will be the permanent addition or if they will seek out other options. But what we know right now for sure is that Mitch Love is no longer a part of the Capitals organization. And at least now Patrick Weller, who has been doing that, filling in that role this season, has that the job for now. And I guess the Capitals will ultimately announce if they plan to make any changes in that regard. But a major shakeup by the Capitals. If you don't know, Mitch Love was the one that ran the defense for the Capitals. And there was a lot of, there was a lot surrounding him, that the feeling was that he was going to be a head coach somewhere in the NHL. And when it was all said and done, and I saw all these coaches going to the respective teams, I'm like, wait, Mitch Love didn't land a head coaching job somewhere? I thought that he would have been one of the first to land a job. But now it makes that much more sense here. Removing one of these voices mid-season changes the daily routine. And I understand he hasn't been with the team. But, it's got to be one of those things like, okay, it's official now. And I'm talking about Chris Patrick. I'm talking Spencer Carberry, that they need to, come up with a plan. Of course, this will be Chris Patrick's decision and probably get some input in from Spencer Carberry, but it's official that he's not coming back. And the timing is terrible, all things considered. It comes right after that big loss to Ottawa. And like I said, I know he wasn't involved to start this season here, but it's, the Capitals are trying to sort out how to play a better game. And now they have this put on their plate. So ultimately, not ideal, but the decision had to be made. Organizations have standards to uphold. And, I know that there is a history of different players that have had some issues. I'm talking Alexiev. Now I'm talking Mitch Love, that generally speaking, if you are involved in this kind of activity, to keep it vague there, that usually the Capitals will cut ties, not exclusively. I guess if there's more to it than just that, the Capitals will do things. But I think it was the right move to make here, as what is being said allegedly here. I don't have all the specifics, but according to the league, they have been found to be true. So that is where we're at right now. And this is as much about a workplace safety and integrity as it is about hockey, that it isn't keeping a coach around just because you like him or he's, fits into your plan. There was some allegations that were substantiated, and that's where we're at. And from a pure hockey perspective, though, it's another distraction. And I'll talk a bit later in the show about how the Capitals played versus Ottawa. But, the team is trying to fix things. Of course, I'm going to say that the last game was a big setback for the team, but Spencer Carberry now has to manage strategy and systems while also managing message and morale. Of course, we know that Weller is still in charge as of right now, but, I think it's up to Spencer Carberry to kind of, convey this message to the players as well, and what this ultimately means for him. And they're going to have to lean on each other here. Will veterans like Ovechkin and Carlson stabilize things? Will it be one of the young voices to step up? Again, I don't think it's going to be a major distraction, just given the fact that the Capitals haven't had Mitch Love on the coaching staff this season. That I think that Weller, is a front runner to land this job. I guess I don't know the thought process by the Capitals organization, but I got to think that he's got to be a front runner to do things. But a tough setback, and at the end of the day, a distraction for the Capitals, as they are coming off a really bad loss against the Ottawa Senators. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the stumble versus the Ottawa Senators. It wasn't long ago that I was talking about the Capitals picking up a decisive victory. Well, the Ottawa Senators came to town and knocked the Capitals down a couple pegs. What's the latest? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making a push. And it doesn't matter if you are a fan of the local team, the Wizards, or whoever the case might be. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you use your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So the game Yes, let's get to the game. I was a bit undecided where I was going to start, but I thought that the Mitch Love news kind of was on the forefront, and everyone wanted to know the latest as of what's going on. But a big setback for the Capitals after the Capitals coming off a decisive victory over Columbus. And it's one of those games that it's only one game, but I feel like the Capitals took more than one step back in this last game. It was one of the worst, if not the worst game that I have seen the Capitals play all this season. And something that I want to make abundantly clear, and if you're an everydayer, I talked about this in yesterday's or in the last episode as well, is that the Ottawa Senators are a really good team. And if you took the jerseys off of them and you didn't have any context about what kind of players they were, you would say, wow, that Ottawa Senator or that team rather on the ice is really good. I think that people's perception changes a bit when you see the Senators jersey on, because the Senators historically, at least recently, have struggled. I'm talking year over year here, the last few years or so. But the one thing that is glaringly apparent is that they are a real threat. And they really took it to the Capitals in the last game. So let's dive into that right now. And what was a historic game for the Capitals, or Alex Ovechkin, shall we say, playing in his 1,500th NHL game, a milestone that not a lot of players have hit. And at age 40, yes, Alex Ovechkin, 40 years old, his 21st season in the league, still a threat every single shift, still producing, and a guy that can score a goal with the best of them, still the face of the franchise. And you could feel it in the building. How special would it have been if Alex Ovechkin would have scored his 900th goal in his 1,500th game? Well, you can take all of that and just throw it in the garbage as the Capitals struggled against the Ottawa Senators. And instead, like I said, an absolute shellacking by Ottawa. Final score 7-1. And, who are the players that really took it to him? Well, in the first period, Dylan Cousin finds the back of the net. Second period, Pinto, Cousins, Dylan Cousins, and Nick Cousins. Third period, Drake Batherson, Thomas Chabot, and Drake Batherson again. That this was an all-out trouncing of the Capitals. Trevor Van Riemsdyk was the only Capital to find the back of the net. I'm talking about shots on goal here because those are the things that matter. The Ottawa Senators outshot the Capitals 34-13, 61% to 39 faceoff percentage. The Ottawa Senators 3 for 4 on the power play. The Capitals 0 for 2. And, if you want to look at the silver lining, the Capitals out-hit them 28-12. But this was a rough game for the Capitals. And like I say, I feel like it takes them a step or two back because they were riding a high, right? And, you take a look at it. They were playing Columbus. They had the Kraken in there, and you're feeling, pretty good about this team. But now it kind of makes you question everything. And I don't want to take any, jumps into the deep pools of negativity here, but the Capitals are going to have to dig deep as they have the Stars on deck and then the New York Islanders. But wow, what a rough game by the Capitals. And like I said, Trevor Van Riemsdyk scoring in the third, a consolation marker at that point is like, hey, at least we got on the board, right? That's what's important. That was difficult. And goaltending and shots, let's be specific. Charlie Lindgren faced 34 shots and made 27 saves while allowing 7 goals. And to be clear here, I don't want the weight of this to go all on Charlie's shoulders. I know that's the easy out. Like, you got to point to a fall guy and go, yeah, it was him. The defense was horrible in this game. And that's a heavy load for him to take on there. 34 shots, and the Capitals recorded about a dozen, or it was 13 shots on goal as well. And, you don't win many NHL games with that kind of offensive output. And it was the miscues. It was the sum total of just a horrendous game against an Ottawa Senators team that, we should know by now, right, is really good. And I know that around the league, oftentimes they're sold short, but they shouldn't be. And if you ever listen to the Locked On Senators podcast, a great podcast, by the way, check those guys out. They cover that team from every angle. A lot of young talent. And this is all about a Senators team that acquired draft picks over the years and just did the right things the right way. That a really early take, I think the Senators could compete. And what we saw, big picture, that team played very well. And the way the second period unfolded for the Capitals, brutal. 3 goals against inside just over 2 minutes. And it's the little things that are the big things, right? Turnovers, coverage confusion, and ill-timed penalties. This was a game that saw the return of Pierre-Luc Dubois. But what did we find out? Dylan Strome left the game. And as I record this at 6:30 Eastern, there's no official word about how much time that he will miss. But if he is going to miss a substantial amount of time, just if I'm going to put on my coaching hat, you got to think that Pierre-Luc Dubois jumps up to the first line center. Connor McMichael takes over at the second line center, Sordiff third line, and Nick Dowd fourth line. That's how I would lay it out anyway until Strome returns. But a big setback for the Capitals, the game, and also Dylan Strome, if in fact he is going to miss a substantial amount of time. But like I said, firepower from all ends. Cousins, Batherson, Pinto, Thomas Chabot. They were firing with both barrels against the Capitals, and they got contributions all over the lineup, and not the Caps. And I hate to be negative, but, I'm not going to be the one that's going to blow fairy dust up here. You know what? When the team is playing poorly, the team played horribly. And this is not an isolated misstep. It is a pattern. Slow starts, defensive lapses, and not enough scoring in these kind of games. And if it's not from the top 6, it's for the bottom 6. And that's been the story of the Capitals at points this season, right? That the bottom 6 was huge. Not the case. And yes, Ovechkin, it was a big game for him. He had a solid career mark against Ottawa. Historically, he has fared well, taking a deep dive into his stats, 38 career goals versus the Senators. So he knows how to score against them. And, at the end of the day, who knows why that is. But in any event, those are the numbers. And that's a real sample size. And it shows how often he has been a thorn in the side over the years against Ottawa, as Ottawa has been the thorn in the side of the Capitals for a bit here. But last night simply wasn't his night. He had chances, flashes of the old magic, but goals weren't falling his way. And, in a team sport, one man can't do it all. And it really hasn't been the case this year, as Alex Ovechkin hasn't been fully engaged in the goal scoring department yet. The guys on the team that historically have done great things was not the case against Ottawa. A lot to look at. And like I said, to circle back to the first segment, with Mitch Love officially being out of the picture, that there is a lot of static, I guess you could say, inside the Capitals organization right now. That I know people are going to say, Dan, maybe you're getting a little ahead of yourself here. The Capitals still are sitting in a good position. I'm not saying that they're going on a losing streak, and there's teams that are horrible right now. But I'm going to be honest with you, and I think that that's why you come to this podcast. You can go to other podcasts, where the staff is paid by the organization. I'm not paid by the Capitals, and I can give you an honest take here that the Capitals struggled in this game, and hopefully they can regroup. I think they got the leadership. I know they got the leadership within the locker room to overcome. We hope that the Dylan Strome injury is not too long lasting. And, we've seen players get dinged up here. I'm talking Trevor Van Riemsdyk. I'm talking about Matt Roy. Luckily, in those cases, they just, missed a little bit of time, got stitched up and put back out. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, another example, of an injury that was supposed to only be for a little bit, turned out to be a lot longer than we all thought. That's what we're going to need. We're going to need this team to get back to what has made them successful. And I have no doubt, zero doubt in my mind, that Spencer Carberry is going to be hard at work. And I would expect to see quite a bit of changes within the forward line combos and perhaps the D pairings, especially true if Dylan Strome is out of the mix. But even if he is, for some reason, good to go in the next game, I expect to see that snow globe shook up a little bit, because what we saw out on the ice versus Ottawa just is not going to cut it. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about things that have not worked well. I hate to say it, that's kind of the theme of this episode, coaches' challenges. And some of the players weigh in how the Capitals have played as of late. I'll discuss next. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games, but let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your favorite team. The Capitals, of course. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives the fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I love that what you see is what you pay, no hidden fees at checkout. I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. And I'm going to go see the Capitals in December, and you best believe that I'm going to be using the Game Time app, and I know that you should as well. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below, and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. There's more and more of you joining each and every day. Get direct news surrounding the organization in a text form shot right to your phone. You can text me back. There's a whole lot to love there. Check out more information in the show notes. So in the final segment here, we're talking about coaches' challenges. And, I listened to Spencer Carberry on John Walton's show, the weekend show that they got running there now. And that he has the ultimate say, to challenge or not to challenge. Of course, he shoots it up to the video coaches. They look at it again and again and again, and they say what they saw. And then Spencer Carberry has to make the decision about if he wants to challenge or not. I'm going to say the Capitals have not done a really great job this year. In fact, rather horrible in these challenges that have not gone their way. And when you take a look at it, I pulled some data on that as well. If I may have missed one in there, you'll have to forgive me. But as of October 26th, the Capitals have not won any coaches' challenges during the 25-26 season. The most recent ones here, October 25th. The Capitals initiated a video review, but the challenge was unsuccessful. October 19th versus the Canucks. The Capitals challenged the Canucks goal for goaltender interference. The call on the ice was upheld, confirming the goal. Those are the ones that I was able to pull up there. And it kind of draws into question. It's a risky one. If there's any question, if there is any reservation, I know it'll take a goal off the box score, right? But if it puts the team on the power play and that team makes you pay like we saw here recently, then it kind of draws into question, like, wait, are you sure? Are you really sure? Because it's one thing if the opposing team doesn't score, but what we have seen is that it does turn out that way. And then it's yet another goal. And it's not only that. I think it is just a big, it really breaks up the team morale, right? That, you're down, that goal was washed out or wasn't allowed. And not only that, the other team goes on the power play and they score. It's like a dagger right in you there. So let's talk about that in more depth here in the final segment here. So not to score is one thing. Who actually moved the needle in this game as well? There are certain players that stood out. Tom Wilson battled hard. He was physical. He competed every shift. Brandon Duhaine was vocal after the game, talking about how things went poorly. But then, like I said, I'm talking about the coach's challenges and the coaching challenging failure. The play was reviewed and the goal was upheld when Washington tried to challenge a potential goaltender interference goal earlier in the second period. That play review and the goal was upheld. On the very next sequence, you know what's coming here. Ottawa scored. That's a twofold hit. First, you lose the challenge. Second, momentum swings immediately the other way. And, it's kind of an interesting thing by Spencer Carberry. I know that, most of the time I stand by all of his decisions, but some of these, I think we need to learn something from it, right? That, you take a look at it, and if there's any question, I'm almost just going to say no. And I know what people are going to say. What are you doing not challenging that, Dan? Or with Spencer Carberry, why are you not challenging that? Definitely wasn't a goal, or that definitely was a goal. And, then you got, people always critical. But at the end of the day, what we have seen thus far in the Capitals organization, I'm talking Spencer, I'm talking the video coaches, they have not been spot on, shall we say. So I think that we need to pump the brakes a little bit on these coaching challenges unless there is more clarity there. If, in fact, it feels like, that it's going to hold up, or if it's not going to be. And but that's just the frustration surrounding the team, right? It is the video challenges not working, and it's the poor play in general. And Coach Spencer Carberry didn't mince words after the game. He said, quote, "We are not good in any facet of the game, right from puck drop, not good enough. Embarrassing performance at home from our group," unquote. And like I said, Brandon Duhaime is like one of the vocal leaders playing on the fourth line. He echoed that as well. We didn't play our game for a full 60 minutes, not even close, unquote. Tom Wilson chimed in, quote, "We need to be way better if we're going to challenge. And if it doesn't go our way, our kills just have to get those done in big moments, just not good enough," unquote. And that's the tough love. A player that I miss in all of these is Niskanen. If you remember, he was always really harsh. Are you asking me how we played? Sucked. We played horrible. You would hear that from him. And I think you need to be an honest assessor. I don't think that you need to beat yourself up too much. It was a game. I get it, Dan. Sometimes I'm harder on this team as well. But, when it is just a straight up shellacking by your opponent, I think that's what drives it down, because the Capitals were driving through the snow. They put it in four-wheel drive, and they still got no traction. Like I say, TVR getting the goal, but other than that, a total burn the film. Or don't burn the film. Review the film and then burn the film and hopefully learn something from it. But, that's the big thing. Special teams coming into focus. Again, the power play not helping, the PK not dialed in, that if the Capitals, want to maintain and get better, they're going to have to work on those things, right? And hopefully, like I said, it's on to the next one. Just like anything else in life, you see your football team lose and you're like, wow, that's horrible. On to the next one. You can't dwell on these things. You can address the things that need to get worked on and move on, because, listening to social media, reading what people have had to say, you lose a game like this and you'd swear to God that the team was in the last place in the Metro. It's not the case, but an ugly loss suffices to say. A lot to learn there. So big takeaways, really look at the coach's challenges. If there's any questions, don't do it. What did we learn in the stumble versus Ottawa? You got to be prepared. The Capitals were not prepared. And then, of course, the Capitals moving on without Mitch Love, and ultimately who is the long-term answer in that position. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. Now for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night. Until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned, get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.